In Season 21, the Poison Scythe Necromancer will finally be the actual best pushing build for the Necromancer, and this bad boy got buffed. As you guys know, if you've been following the channel for a while, we've been playing this build since August of 2017, and it is finally the top build for the Necromancer, and I am so excited to play it. So in this guide, we're going to show you basically the basics of what you need to get into this build and perform and be successful. And then towards the end, we'll give you some tips and alternate play styles you can really do to min-max. But either way, this thing's insane. I'm not wasting any time. Let's get into it. Now in the gameplay above, you're just going to see some quick first try, 125 plus GR pushes. In the video description below, we'll link a full day of pushing with this build on PTR. I think we hit like 128, 129, somewhere in there. Pretty easy, a filthy casual 3300 Paragon. But this build, guys, I kid you not, will be the tankiest build you have ever played in Diablo 3. Not only on the squishiest class historically in the history of Diablo, the Necromancer, but this will be the tankiest build you have ever played. It is like playing a support character that does a ton of damage. And as I said in the intro, we're going to tell you guys the basics of getting started and what the easiest playstyle is and what's going to get you into those high GRs without really much effort. You're going to be tanky. You don't have to worry about like getting out of anything. You can tank basically anything you come across. And towards the end of the video, we'll give you some tips and tricks as well as alternate ways you can play this build. But this is the easiest setup that you can possibly put together, and we're going to tell you exactly why. So this build revolves around the skill Grim Scythe, and more specifically, Ledger's Disdain. Ledger's Disdain says you deal an additional 80% damage for each point of essence the Grim Scythe restores. Meaning, if you have 0 essence pool or very low essence pool and you swipe, every point of essence it restores will give you more damage. So the goal here is just to be at low essence and just swipe away with your Grim Scythe. In the cube, we're using the Nair's Black Death, which says each different poison skill you use increases your damage by up to 100% for 15 seconds. So you're gonna get stacks of Nair's Black Death every single time you use your poison skill. Hence the name Poison Scythe. You're stacking a ton of different poison abilities in order to get the most damage out of your Grim Scythe. Now, some of you guys have been following the channel for a while. We've created multiple guides for this build. And although it felt really good and it was pretty strong, it was a respectable push build, not obviously as high top tier as some of the other builds have been in the past. But one of the biggest problems we've always had is we had no great way of dumping our essence, right? We had no way to proc a Nair stack and dump all of our essence. Well, as of this patch in the Season 21 2.6.9, we finally have a new item that fixes this issue. Raz's Volition. So this says Skeletal Mage gains the effect of Gift of Death Rune and Singularity Rune, and you gain 50%, up to 50% damage reduction if your essence is not full. So not only did they give us a way to dump essence, which we'll show in just a second, but they also gave us even more mitigation, which this build was already tanky as crap before. Now, the reason that's just so good, Raz's Volition, is because it gives us Singularity, right? And what that gives us the freedom to do is run any rune on Skeletal Mage. Now, of course, you guys can see where I'm going with this. There is a poison rune on Skeletal Mage. Contamination. So that means when you're at full essence or near full essence, you can dump your essence with the mage and it'll completely deplete your essence, and it gives you a poison mage, which is proccing a stack of Nair's Black Death. So it finally has a synergy with the build. Now, the damage that the actual mage does is pretty trivial. It's no slouch, but it's pretty trivial compared to the rest of your damage. All your damage is really coming from Grim Scythe here. The other big change for you guys that have been following the build is Haunted Visions got a massive revamp in this patch. So now Simulacrum drains 1% of your maximum life every second and lasts forever. So you have permanent Simulacrum. They can now duplicate Grim Scythe instead of Skeletal Mage. What does that mean? So before, the Simulacrums would only copy your secondary skills, meaning Skeletal Mage, Bone Spear, Death Nova. Those are the only skills that they could copy. But now, if you have Grim Scythe on your bar, your Simulacrums will also cast Grim Scythe. And what this means is when you cast Simulacrum, not only do they last forever, but they're going to copy the Grim Scythe that you do. And of course, we're going to run the Blood and Bone rune, so we get 2 Simulacrums. So that means at any time, we're doing triple damage with our Grim Scythe. And again, our Grim Scythe is our main damage dealer. So it's amazing. But the thing that makes them really amazing and is not on the surface of this particular build is that the Simulacrums will always do the full damage that is possible from Grim Scythe. So even if your Necro has full essence, which would mean you're not getting very much damage out of Grim Scythe at all, your Simulacrums have no essence pool themselves. So it's like they always swipe for 0 essence, which is basically the optimum amount of damage you can possibly do with Grim Scythe. And they're always doing that, regardless of what your essence pool is. Obviously, you want to dump your essence so that you hit harder with Grim Scythe. But your Simulacrum clones, they don't care. Now, again, we're using the Nair's Black Death, so we want as many poison abilities on our bar as possible. Now, a lot of people would recommend just running like any poison skill, or, you know, like Bone Spear or Blood Siphon, or things you have to, like a Death Nova, Poison Death Nova. But those are things you actually have to cast. And the reason I'm going to recommend what I'm about to recommend is you don't have to cast them. You don't have to worry about them. So all you're focusing on is swiping with Grim Scythe and dumping your essence with the Mage. And of course, you're going to be manually casting Bone Armor at optimal times, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But the other 2 poison abilities will trigger on their own, and those are stacks of Nair's Black Death you're never going to have to worry about. What are those? Well, one, we're running Skeletons with Kill Command. Basically what this does is you put this ability on Numlock, and if you guys don't know what Numlock is, go to my YouTube channel and watch the Numlock guide. It will change your life if you don't know what I'm talking about. But basically, we're going to Numlock Command Skeletons Kill Command, and what this does is it has these poison skeletons up, and as soon as we Numlock it and we run into a target, our skeletons will blow themselves up. And when they come back to life, they're going to immediately rush towards whatever your mouse is hovered over and blow themselves up. And you can see down here, we have the free stack of Nairs. We don't have to do anything. It's just always there. A brilliantly easy way of keeping your Nair's Black stats up. And the 5th and final poison ability we're using is Command Golem Decay Golem, which again, guys, you can also Numlock. Basically what he'll do is he'll look for corpses around you and consume them. And when he consumes them, it gives you a stack of Nair's Black Death. So just to show this here, we'll put on our Numlocks, and our skeletons will go blow themselves up as long as I have essence, which I do. And then boom, now we have corpses, and our golem's going to automatically eat the corpses on cooldown and keep up our stacks of Nair's Black Death. So all we're doing, like I said, is you're swiping with your Grim Scythe, and you're dumping your essence with your Skeletal Mage, and you're casting Bone Armor on demand before that poison rotation, which again we'll get into in just a second. Why the Command Golem's great is because we are using Golem Skin Breaches, so that's going to lower his cooldown by 25 seconds, giving him a 20-second cooldown, which his active ability stinks and it doesn't really do anything for you besides keep that stack of Nair's Black Death up. But the important thing here is we get 30% less damage taken. And let me put this in perspective for you guys. So I talked about how this is the tankiest build you ever play. I mean it. So we're getting mitigation from Raz's Volition, 50% mitigation if you have a perfect pair of shoulders. You're getting 30% damage reduction from Golem Skin Breaches. You're getting 50% reduction from wearing the Dainty's Binding. We're using Trag'Oul's Corroded Fangs, so every single time you swipe, you're going to cast a curse, as long as you're using the Cursed Scythe Rune, which you will be because it's poison. So you're going to curse a target, and having a curse on a target gives you 50% damage reduction. We get the mitigation bonus from the Legacy of Dreams gem. We're using Stone Gauntlets in conjunction with Ice Climbers, and why that's important. So Stone Gauntlets, every single time you get hit, your armor is increased by 50%, and that stacks up to 5 times. So you get 250% additional armor, which is a lot, but at the cost of reducing your movement speed and attack speed by 20%. However, if you run Ice Climbers, which basically gives you immunity to freeze and immobilize effects, this cancels out the negative effects of Stone Gauntlets. So you just get flat 250% more armor, which is a ton of mitigation. We're not done. We're also going to be using this standalone passive, which gives us 100% additional armor, but it's reduced by 10% for each minion we have. Now, you might be thinking, well, Fluff, you're going to have Command Skeletons. That's like 7 dudes plus the Golem. That's 8. So you're going to have 20% damage from standalone. Guys, we're using Kill Command. We're going to have no skeletons, like 99.9% of the time, because as soon as the skeleton spawns, it's going to rush itself at a target because you're Numlocking and blow itself up. So at maximum, at all times, we're only going to have the Decay Golem up, which still gives us 90% increased armor from this passive. So 90% plus the 250% we're getting from the gloves is a lot of armor. Did I mention I wasn't done? Because in the cube, we're running a Unity, right? So all the damage we take through all that mitigation is split between me and the Templar. And if that wasn't enough for you guys, right? What, six forms of mitigation? We got a 7th. We're using Ancient Parthen Defenders. So if you get low, or every single time you stun with your bone armor, you're going to proc Ancient Parthen Defenders, and your mitigation is going to shoot through the freaking roof. It is insane. Listen, the mitigation on this build is so insane, I don't even run a cheat death. Normally, you have to run Final Service in Necromancer builds, but you just never die. And we're talking about being in GR 130s and never taking any damage. Now, again, towards the end of the video, we'll talk about different setups that you can run, but this is the easiest way and the fastest way to just get into this build and get into high GRs and just tank all the damage in the world and just sit there and scythe minions to death. Other passives include Spreading Malediction, because again, every single time we swipe with our Grim Scythe, we are going to be cursing a target. And so the more targets that are cursed, the more damage we're going to get. Running Swift Harvesting, because it just basically gives us 15% more attack speed on our Grim Scythe, which is big. Because again, Grim Scythe is our main damage dealer. We are using Overwhelming Essence because, like I said before, our Simulacrum clones always get the full benefit from basically having 0 essence, since they never have an essence pool. But it also gives us a higher cap of what we can hit for if we're surrounded by mobs. You guys will notice if you have a big pack of mobs around you and you swipe once, your essence bar will go to full. And so the higher essence bar is, the harder you're going to hit, which is why it's important to get Overwhelming Essence. And also in your Paragon, you want to make sure you have maximum essence. So again, a higher essence cap means the harder you're going to hit if you have a big screen of mobs. As far as other gear is concerned, again, we're using that Ledger Sustain. It gives us the damage to Grim Scythe. We're using Trigal's Coated Fang because it gives us 200% damage to cursed enemies, which everything gets cursed as long as you swipe them. An important note here is we're using Depth Diggers. We're wearing the Depth Diggers. Those just give us a flat 100% additional damage to primary skills. And guess what? Grim Scythe's a primary skill, so that's a no-brainer. We're using Convention of Elements. A really good item on Necromancer builds, because Necromancers, as you guys know, only have 3 elements. So the uptime you get with Convention on Elements on a Necro versus other classes is just flat better. So 33.3% of the time, you're going to have 200% increased damage to the element of your choice. And you're going to want to use this to your advantage, right? So you see down on the buff bar, that's what you need to pay attention to. If you're on physical rotation, that means you're about to hit poison rotation. And when you hit poison rotation, you definitely want to stun enemies to get that maximum damage from Chrisman Sentence, which we're just about to talk to. We're going to use Chrisman Sentence in this build because you get 300% damage if the mobs are CC'd, basically. And so the way we CC mobs is through the stun on Bone Armor Dislocation. So again, stun enemies on poison rotation. The bigger the pack you have together, the harder you're going to hit, because we are stacking area damage in this build, and we'll get into that in a minute. So not only does it give you more damage from the COE on the poison rotation, but they're also going to be stunned, so you get the triple bonus from Chrisman. Plus, to make sure nothing happens to you during your biggest damage window, we're wearing Ancient Parthen Defenders. We'll just make sure you're basically immune to all damage. Now, you can also use the Parthens to your advantage. So say, Molten's about to blow up. Maybe you're not on your poison rotation, but you're in the middle of all these mobs. You can just stun right when you know the Molten Explosion is about to go off, and you'll basically tank it. Even like a 130 plus Molten Explosion, you can tank. Just stun them. It's insane. For the helmet, we're wearing the Leoric's Crown. Normally you put a diamond in this bad boy, but we just don't need the cooldown reduction on this build. I know it's weird playing a Necro build that doesn't stack cooldown reduction, especially from me. What? But we're just gonna throw an Amethyst in this bad boy and get 46% more life. So our health pool is at a juicy 1 million on top of all our forms of mitigation. Just standing in town, I'm at 225 million toughness. I just can't get over it. The last piece of gear, which might seem really weird, is we are wearing a set piece. Now, normally, with Ledger or Legacy of Dreams, you can't wear any set bonuses, which is true. So that allows you to wear green pieces as long as you don't form a set bonus. If I was wearing 2 pieces of Tal Rasha, then we would cancel out Legacy of Dreams. But you guys will know, it's like Tal Rasha, that's a wizard chest. True. The reason Tal Rasha is so good in this setup, because 1, there's not a lot. You could wear an Aquila, but the uptime you'll get on Aquila is basically none, like 1% uptime on Aquila. So I highly recommend getting your hands on a Tal Rasha chest piece. Why a Tal Rasha chest piece? Because it is the only chest piece in the game that can roll attack speed. And why attack speed is important is it affects how fast you scythe. And again, scythe is how we do all of our damage. Therefore, the Tal Rasha, the only chest piece in the game that can roll attack speed, is the best. So if you're grouping with a wizard, tell them to give you a Tal Rasha chest piece, or just roll chests on a, an alt wizard. Try to get this bad boy. If you can't get your hands on a Talrasha, you can run an Aquila, but again, the uptime, it basically sucks. You can get that Shimizu, the one that gives you all crits if you're below 25% health. You'll probably get the same uptime on that as you will Aquila, or just any chest that's ancient. Just put it in. It'll be fine. But Talrasha is the best. As far as legendary gems are concerned, of course, this is a Legacy of Dreams, so we have to wear the Legacy of Dreams no matter what. Simplicity Strength is a staple, because Simplicity Strength gives you increased damage to primary skills, and every single time you hit with the primary skill, so every single time we swipe, we heal for 4% of our maximum health, which is great. Even more survivability. Are you kidding me? And then lastly, we're actually going to run a Bane of the Stricken here, because again, this is a push build. So once you're reaching the higher end of what you're capable of with this build, you definitely want to put a Stricken inside of one of your sockets. This basically just makes it so like those big single targets, the more you swipe on them, you're going to apply a stack of Stricken, and that decreases the damage they take. So you're swiping them like 100 times. That's a good amount of damage, which might seem crazy. We are not running Bane of the Trapped in this build. I will say you can run Bane of the Trapped, you know, if you're just trying to play this build and speed yourself through GRs. But again, we're going to recommend a lot of different speed farm builds, and we'll have a lot of those guys coming. So I wouldn't play this for speeds. It can do it though. Now, stat priority. Guys, this is going to blow some of your minds, but we're not stacking cooldown reduction. Every other build probably that I've ever made stacks cooldown reduction. And this one we don't care about. We don't want it. What we do want, however, is attack speed and more importantly, area damage. So anywhere you can get those two stats, you're going to want to. So you're going to be wearing the Triangle's Corroded Fang. Ideally, you would want attack speed, damage, and area damage with a socket. I've got cooldown on this bad boy because I've got a ton of speed farm builds and I don't want to re-roll this thing. On the ledgers, you're going to want crit chance, Grim Sight damage, and area damage as well. So look out for a perfect ledgers. On shoulders, you're going to want invite, area damage, and then you could go with a little bit of cooldown because it's not worthless to have cooldown. Cooldown will affect how often you can bone armor. But again, ideally, you only want to bone armor during the poison rotation of your convention of elements. But if you're having survivability issues, you can pop bone armor dislocation real quick and quickly heal the full with your swipes because nothing will be hitting you. So cooldown is not a huge slash here. You could just roll armor. You know, you get great value from having armor on any of your gear because again, we have, you know, the stone gauntlets plus ice climbers plus the standalone. So we get tons of armor buffs. So the more base armor you have, the better. On stone gauntlets, again, guys, to get these, you're gonna have to roll a barb or have, you know, a barb that's in the group drop you a pair, and you probably have to reforge them in the queue with bounties. Ideally, though, you want crit damage, crit chance, and area damage. If you can get crazy lucky, the quadfecta would be attack speed, crit damage, crit chance, area damage. For helmets, just a Leoric's crown, invite, crit chance, and again, you can put an amethyst in there. I will say, however, if you really want the min-max, you can get Andariel's Visage, that yellow skull helmet. It can roll poison damage and it can roll attack speed. So it's actually quite good for this setup. I just don't even have one stored on my non-seasonal character, so I can't even show you what it is. But that's quite good for this build to really min-max. Again, a Talrasha chest, you want that infight, attack speed, and armor. Because again, you get great value from armor. For belts, invite, Grim Sight damage. Again, you can roll Grim Sight damage on a belt. And then last, you can go with life or armor, because again, you get really good value from armor. Depth Diggers, invite, Grim Sight damage, no question. Depth Diggers can roll Grim Sight damage, so make sure you get it on there. And then 2 sockets. For boots, invite, armor, reduced damage from cold attacks is one of the special stats that can roll on ice climbers. And all the rest here is just fine. It's gonna be, you could go with movement speed to get a little bit more intelligence, but at the end of the day, it's not a huge deal. Bracers, poison, invite, and crit chance gonna be the go-to stats. For Haunted Visions, you have a lot of options here with stats. Ideally, you would want crit damage. Crit damage is going to be rank 1. Then I would probably go with poison damage as rank 2. And then because you're going to have crit on your offhand, you could kind of drop it from your necklace. You know, probably a poison, crit damage, crit chance necklace will be the best. But if you get one with like poison, crit damage, and say attack speed or say area damage, you can use it. It'll be pretty good. Convention of Elements, an attack speed roll here or an area damage roll here would be the best. And then crit damage, crit chance. And Chrisbin, this will probably be one of the hardest items in the build. You'd like to run the Chrisbin sentence if possible because the Chrisbin can roll crit damage, attack speed, and even area damage. So look out for that. So attack speed, crit damage, area damage, socket would be the dream for this particular setup. But again, you can run a Unity. It's going to be a lot easier to roll than a Chrisbin. If you did have to go that route, I would say, crit damage, crit chance, increased damage versus elites, and a socket. Now, some quick tips. As I said, we're going to give you some quick tips of how to play this build and some min-max things you can do. While you're playing the build, make sure that while you're walking around, you dump your essence. You don't want to be walking around and trying to gather density together with a high essence pool. Because of the shoulders, you get more mitigation the less amount of essence you have. So make sure while you're walking around and gathering mobs together, you keep that essence pool low because it's going to make you tankier. Another thing that can happen a lot, and you guys will notice this, if you're swiping away, your simulacrum clones could be off in the distance. Sometimes they want to do their own thing. All you really have to do in this situation is just stop attacking for 1.5 seconds, and that'll cause the simulacrums to snap to you. Unless there's something like a wall or a waller in the way of you and them, they'll just snap right back to you, and you can go back to scything because they'll be in a better spot. The other kind of weird thing, and I don't know if it's because of my keyboard or what, but because we're numlocking, like I said, we're numlocking Command Golem and we're numlocking Command Skeletons in this build. I have noticed that if Command Skeletons is on my bar before Command Golem, sometimes my Command Skeletons numlock will not trigger. I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's specific to my keyboard or what. Just to avoid that, just make sure you have Command Golem before you have Command Skeletons on your bar and you numlock them in that order. I don't know what that is about, but it happens for me every time. As far as playstyle is concerned, again, we're talking area damage here. So the more damage you can do in an area of effect, the more mobs that are around you, the more air damage you're going to get. It's big. You're wanting to stack huge packs of mobs here. It's big packs. And then wait for that poison rotation, stun them, and then start swiping away. Make sure you don't have any essence before you start swiping away. And that's the whole playstyle. It's crazy tanky. Now with this particular setup, because we're in the Command Golem and we're running the Golem Skin Breaches in the cube, sometimes you will get trapped. You'll get trapped by mobs being around you. It doesn't happen a lot, as you'll see in the gameplay above, but it happens enough. But it's really not a big deal because you can stun and swipe, and then those trash mobs will probably die and get out of your way. But that's something to keep in mind, and that's a reason a lot of people like to run illusory boots. I don't think they're necessary, and they, you drop a form of mitigation to get them. But if that is a nuisance for you, you can pick up a pair of illusory boots, no problem. They just make you move through enemies. You can either put it in the cube and cube the ice climbers, or you can wear the ice climbers and put illusories in the cube. Again, I don't know if I necessarily recommend that because you do lose the 30% mitigation that the golems can give you. And you do lose that ability to just numlock the golem and have that permanent stack. But if you're getting trapped all the time and it's causing, clears for you, you can switch. Another thing you can do is you can wear the Nemesis bracers. So every single time you touch a pylon, it'll spawn a pack of champions. I personally really like this option. I always recommend people to start with the Parthens, get used to the build. You'll be the tankiest thing you can ever imagine. The worst player in the world could go into a high GR with this build. It's that tanky and just swipe, right? But if you're really trying to min-max and getting, the most you can get out of those pylons, I would probably drop Parthens for a pair of Nemesis, and you'll probably see me doing that a lot. If you're running Nemesis, you could also make an argument to maybe run Flavor of Time instead of Unity in the cube. Again, you would lose that 50% damage mitigation, so you're gonna have to make that judgment call. Can you survive? Do you feel tanky enough without the Unity in the cube? The Flavor of Time will give you that double duration on pylons, which can be big, especially if you're running Nemesis bracers. Getting like a triple pack on top of a conduit or a power pylon is so much progress inside of a Greater Rift. So again, that's something you want to play with. The only negative aspect of running the Golem is that sometimes he can prevent you from generating really good density. Like he'll taunt mobs and basically stop a pack from chasing you or something like that. So if you're really comfortable and you can drop the Golem skin from the build, you could possibly pick up something like Bone Spear, which sounds kind of wonky. And again, it's not gonna auto cast itself, but it can be really good for, generating density. Make sure you're like, ooh, I want to tag this mob over here, but I'm in the middle of swiping these guys. I can just shoot a spear over towards this guy and make sure he gets pulled in. It can be just a nice skill for gathering up mobs. Another thing you'll see people do is they'll run Power Siphon with Power Shift, and they'll gather mobs together with the Power Siphon. And then as they do that, Power Siphon gives you a damage increase by 10% each time damage is dealt. Max 10 stacks. So it'll give you 100% more damage to your poison scythe when you finally do that. So I see, in 4-man metas especially, People will gather trash using the Blood Siphon, make sure they're at their 10 stacks, and as soon as they get to the poison rotation of Seaweed, they'll stop casting Blood Siphon, stun, and then start doing their poison Scythe rotation. And so that's also something you guys can do. Now, again, these suggestions will cause you to have to micromanage more things, and I don't know if that's something you like to do, but just unlocking the command golem and the command skeletons makes this a pretty chill build overall. And that's why I recommend it as where you start. But again, there's a lot of things you can do to really min-max how this build performs. But that is basically going to do it for this guide. If you guys have any questions, feel free to stop by the Twitch stream or ask them in the comment section below. I try to get to those as best I can. I'm only one man though, so if I don't get your question answered, I'm sorry. This is by far and away the most consistent push build the Necro has ever had. I would bet, however, this will overperform in 4-man, and we could see a potential nerf to this build in Season 22. So, get it while it's hot, team. But I'm very excited to push this build myself. We've been playing this build since August of 2017. Back when we played it with Anarius, and then LLD got added, and we changed it up a little bit then. And now it's finally the top push build for the Necromancer, and I'm excited to check it out. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. As always, like, subscribe, come over to Twitch, ask your questions. We love you guys. Peace out.